holding out a no to racism banner as well. Do you share that view?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. What he says I find very racist, and I'm opposed to everything that he says in terms of that. He's expressed racism. As far as the children go, he only changes when he spots the popularity or the lack of popularity of what he says. He's a populist, basically.
What about those supporters who are going to say, look, he's doing all right on North Korea, he's making progress, getting NATO to stump up more money, doesn't he have some things going for him?
Well, as far as North Korea goes, I just don't believe what he's doing has got anything to do with the interest of peace. It's got everything to do with the interests of Donald Trump.
Aaron Emilio, thank you very much indeed. Christian, we did come across a couple of Trump supporters here. They're lost in the crowd over there at the moment. They're saying people are misunderstanding this man. He should be given more credit than he is being given for. People are thinking they're mistaking his personality for his policies, and on things like North Korea and on things like the whole Trump idea on NATO spending more money. People should listen and take more notice of that rather than this other stuff. But those people are very much in the minority here outside the front gate of Blenheim Palace. The majority here say no to Donald Trump. They regard him as a racist, a misogynist, and a real disappointment in his first 18 months in office as the President of the United States.
Duncan Kennedy, outside the gates of Blenheim Palace, thank you very much, and thank you to your guests as well. Yes, it is worth mentioning that there are plenty of people tweeting me who say he's very welcome here in the UK. He is a divisive president, but there are plenty of supporters as well, and that point should be made as well. Lots of history at Blenheim Palace, and of course there'll be a lot of focus on Sir Winston Churchill tonight, but we should just make point of the fact that if you go a little bit down the A44, you come to Haythrop, where a certain Theresa May grew up as a young child. Her father was the vicar there. She later moved to Wheatley, which tells you there are lots of wheat fields that you can run around in this part of Oxfordshire. We are on the eastern edge of the Cotswolds. It is pretty, and you're going to see a lot of that as Marine One flies in this evening for that black tie dinner at the Palace, and we'll bring you that live, of course, here on the BBC News Channel.
Christian, many thanks. Christian Fraser there, of course. The new Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, has been outlining the government's Brexit plans to MPs, but there were chaotic scenes in Parliament as the session had to be suspended when copies of the White Paper, which is more than 100 pages long, were not distributed to members ahead of the statement. Our political correspondent Jonathan Blake reports.
Only a few days into the job, the new Brexit Secretary has his first big moment, setting out the government's plan for life outside the EU, in black and white and in the most detail we've seen so far. Finally, plans put forward on trade, security, regulations and more.
Secretary Dominic Raab.
Mr. Speaker, the government is determined to build a new relationship that works both for the UK and the EU, one grounded in our shared history, but which also looks to a bright and ambitious future.
But MPs weren't happy that they didn't have copies of the government's plans. Chaotic scenes before the House was suspended while they were dished out from boxes.
The point of these statements, the point is to allow questions to be asked of the Secretary of State, and by proceeding in this way, this utter shambles, it denies proper scrutiny of this White Paper.
This White Paper sets out the right Brexit deal, delivering on the result of the referendum, taking back control over our money, laws and borders, supporting the economy by maintaining a strong trading relationship after we've left, ending free movement whilst avoiding a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, or indeed between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, restoring sovereignty over Parliament and the authority of the UK Supreme Court, seizing the opportunity to forge new trade deals around the world, and maintaining cooperation with the EU in the many other areas that we prize.
Since ministers met to agree the plan at Chequers last week, 2 senior members of the Cabinet have resigned, and many more Conservative MPs remain unconvinced.
It seems to be the approach of the government is, we don't want to leave the European Union, how close can we remain to it, how little can we deviate from the European Union?
The Prime Minister has described this as a principled and practical set of proposals. It's been a long slog to get to this point, but even now Theresa May knows she can't please everyone in her own party when it comes to Brexit. So there will be fights to come over the details of this plan, with Conservative MPs and with the European Union.
We will stop sending vast contributions to the EU every year. We will ensure that the European Court of Justice doesn't have jurisdiction in the UK any longer, and we will ensure that we bring an end to free movement. That's an absolute guarantee, not to be negotiated. Free movement will end.
Expect talk of breakdowns and breakthroughs in the months ahead. The government's white paper is the starting point for negotiations with the EU. Ministers will hope their plan won't be written off too soon. Jonathan Blake, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, our chief political correspondent Vicky Young is at Westminster for us now. And Vicky, we saw some of the reaction to these plans in that piece there, but more broadly speaking, how have these plans gone down?
Well, talking there about whether she can not please everyone, the question is whether she can please anyone, and we've certainly had a succession of her own backbenchers getting up to raise their concerns about all of this. Now, Ian Duncan Smith, for example, saying that he voted to leave, he has deep misgivings about this. He said, I voted to leave, not to half leave, and their concerns are many. They're worried about the role of the European Court of Justice. They think that this plan means that they still will have jurisdiction over the United Kingdom. They're worried about this idea of a common rule book. They were still going to be able to follow and have to follow all of the regulations when it comes to goods, and they're questioning whether Parliament really would have any kind of power to reject them. And then when it comes to immigration, that very powerful subject during the referendum, they're worried that there will be even more concessions, and that actually in the end the government is not ruling out giving special treatment to EU citizens. Another Conservative MP said the problem all along has been the government has treated Brexit as a problem, as something which has issues that need to be mitigated, not something that is a huge opportunity for the country. So at the moment, Theresa May has a massive problem with this, because the Labour Party is saying they don't agree with it for one reason. For the opposite reason, there are many on her own side who say they don't agree with it. Next week, she faces more problems in the House of Commons when the Customs Bill comes before the House on Monday. And yet again, Conservatives on her own side, those Brexiteers, saying and threatening to defeat her.
OK, Vicky, thank you. Well, Hans-Olaf Henkel is a German MEP for the European Conservatives and Reformists, and he's in our Berlin studio for us now. Thanks very much for joining us here on BBC News. Don't know how much time you've had to study these plans just released today by the government, but hopefully you have. What do you think of them?
Well, it is, first of all, as one of your commentators says, it's not the deal. It is a proposal by the British government, and it has to be approved, of course, by the European Union. Quite frankly, as you perhaps know, I think Brexit is a lose-lose situation anyway for both Britain and the European Union. And before that paper, we had sort of three options for a Brexit, like a hard Brexit, like a free trade agreement, or a customs union. And the proposal by the British government is now in the middle. So it is less harmful, I think, for British business and European business as compared to a hard Brexit, but it's not nearly as good as a customs union would be. May I just add that before I joined politics 4 years ago, I was in German industry. I was also the president of the German Federation of Industries for 6 years, which is the equivalent roughly of the CBI. And I have not met a single business person on the continent, and hardly any in Britain, who doesn't think that Brexit is actually a bad deal. And you ask Trump and you ask Putin, they both are in favor of a hard Brexit. We heard that from Trump today. And I think every British person should ask himself or herself, why are these two people in favor of a hard Brexit? It's very clear for me. They want a weak Britain and they want a weaker European Union.
Well, Mr. Henkel, you said at the beginning, this is not a deal, and you're absolutely right. This is a plan. It's a proposal. It is the negotiating basis, if you like, for the government's position with Brussels. How is this going to go down in Brussels?
Well, the first reaction was sort of silence. And I think they should be silent, because Monsieur Barnier, who is the chief negotiator on the European side, and Mr. Verhofstadt in particular, who is the representative of the European Parliament, have been treating the British with a high degree of arrogance. I think that was one of the reasons why your new Brexit minister, who used to be a Remainer, now has become a Brexiteer, and have some understanding for that, because they really treated the British with arrogance. So I think they are now well advised to make sure that the British get the best deal possible. Because the best deal for British industry is automatically the best deal for the European industry. And I tell you, the impact of Brexit on Europe hasn't really been quite understood. The British start to understand it. Let me just add that after Brexit, not China and not the United States, but Britain will become the largest customer of the European Union. And I think it's about time that the negotiators in Brussels recognize that.
Really interesting. Very good to talk to you. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Hans Olaf Henkel, many thanks for your time. Thank you. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Ben Rich.
Rita, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. It's turned a little bit mixed.